because we need plenty of time today. All right, so I'm not going to make any new coils at the moment. All I'm going to do is take what I have and I'm going to attach. So you can see that these things aren't attached yet. So I'm going to very delicately kind of pull them away without changing the form. I want to keep that form. And then I'm going to do some scoring and attaching. Now this step is really important. I want you to watch what I'm doing and make sure that you do the same thing, because if you don't attach well, things fall apart. So attaching and scoring. Scoring means I'm going to be cutting into and creating a texture on both of the areas that I'm attaching. And then when you slip, the term slip refers to putting either slip, which is liquid clay, which we don't have, or water between the two to act as kind of like a glue. So actually, before I remove these, I should have made a mark. My drawing helps me. But if you don't have a drawing down, you might want to make a mark around the tree trunk to tell you where to score. So I'm going to put these things back for a second and make those marks, because then I can score pretty quickly, because I'll know exactly where to do it. So I'm marking the trunks, and then I'm also marking this tree limb here where this little baby limb is touching. Okay, then I'm going to separate them, and then take my fork, and then I'm going to score pretty deep, and I'm going to crisscross. I'm going to cross hatch so that it's nice and deep. And I'm just going to go around and do that on all of my attached areas. Kind of like an assembly line here. You don't want to use, if you have a tool like this, which I didn't give you, but you might have it in a clay package you bought. These are tiny little serrated ribbed teeth. You don't want to use something this shallow because it's not going to make a deep enough cut. You could use like a needle tool if you don't want to have a fork and do that. That works too. But really the fork is the fastest way. It's my preferred scoring tool. And you guys are I'm gonna give you one thing for homework this break. And that thing for homework is gonna be to unwrap your piece halfway through the week and put some water on it. If you don't do that, it's probably gonna dry out, because a week is a really long time for your piece to sit there. It will only take you 2 minutes, but super important. You might even want to like put it as a reminder in your phone or something. Okay, so I've scored all of my attachments. Yes.
Do we when we unwrap it and like add water to our piece, do we also do that to the block of clay?
I would do that to your block of clay right now, like before you wrap it up today. But only if it's not, I don't want you to dump a half a cup of water in there if it's already wet. I only told Megan to do that because she said her clay was really dry. Okay, so you can put a little water on your piece if it's wet, and your clay if it's wet. Okay, so now I have a little sponge here. You could also use a paintbrush, and I'm just dipping it in the water, and I'm not adding a huge amount of water, just kind of tapping it on there. And this helps it become kind of glue-like. It's really good to use slip, but you have to be in a functional studio where they make slip to use slip. Okay, so there's moisture everywhere. So the next step is called compression. Compression really is the key here to making sure these are attached well. So before I compress, I'm going to line them up again, and then I'm going to put counter pressure on the other side of where I'm pushing. So if I'm pushing with my right hand here, I'm going to put counter pressure on the left so I don't kind of warp my piece. I'm going to take my fingers and like really squeeze it on there and push and seal that seam. Don't worry about attaching yet, just push it on there for now. And then I'm going to do this other side here. And I'm really making sure it's nice and lined up before I compress and really attach it. Push on the seam everywhere you have access. I'm going to show you also how to work on the other side too. So you might have to take it and pinch it in with your fingers and kind of spread it out a little bit. Make sure to get those underside areas. You can take your fingertip and try to like attach it if it seems like the natural thing to do. But compression first. Don't seal that seam until that limb is really attached well. And you'll see that that clay where the water is kind of squishes out, and it kind of makes sort of like a natural slip, which is liquid clay, like liquidy clay. And this is where tools come in handy, because my fingertip can't really get in there to the groove of that. So I realize you guys don't have these, but you could use something like a butter knife or some other flat, you know, shape, and you want to kind of get in there in the crease and seal that seam nicely up here too. Okay, then I'm going to do these top ones first, and then I'll do these. Yes?
There's something to cover the seam with the flat surface. Does something like this work?
Hang on a second. I gotta find you. Where are you? Is this Jillian?
This is Kira.
Kira. I'm not seeing your image, Kira.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, there you are. Okay, you're in the dark. All I see is your silhouette, so I can't really see you. Here, hold it up a little bit closer. Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so I forgot to score these limbs here, so I'm going to do that. Put a little water on them. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, so I'm going to line this top one up before I compress. And then I'm going to kind of wiggle it in there, compress. Do the same for the top one. Now, I would ask that everybody's working right now on your sculptures. We have to capitalize on the time we have to make these. Okay, now that I've compressed, I'm using my fingertip to attach and close that seam. Okay, now I'm going to take these little baby limbs and line them up first, make sure I want them there, and I'm really paying attention to the negative space here. I want it to be the same on both sides. I could even, if I was being meticulous, I could measure it. So it's like 2.5 inches. This one feels a little bigger to me than this one, so I might move this back a bit and push it this way. Make this curve a little bigger. Okay, compression. Here's a little trick. Here's a little pro tip for ceramics. If you have a crack or you're trying to seal something that is cracked, compression is the answer, not water. Because water will make those clay particles break down and fall apart because they surround the clay particle. Compression, which means you're pushing them together forcefully, creates less space between the particles, and it makes them stick together better. So if you have a crack in your piece, score it. You might want to add a teeny little bit of water just to make it slippery again, and then compress. All right, now I'm going to take my tool and go into these corners and make sure they're sealed. Now I was thinking about how I was going to talk about the surfaces here. You have some options, and I want you to decide you have option A would be to keep everything smooth. Traditionally, with the Mexican Tree of Life sculpture, most of the limbs and things are smooth so that there a lot of detail can be painted on those limbs. If you don't want to go traditional like that in terms of Mexican culture, you can make up your own thing that you think goes with your culture. And if that involves creating some texture on your tree, that is fine too. Just keep in mind, if you carve a texture into these limbs, then you can't really paint a detailed pattern on here. It'll be really hard. So, but that's up to you. If you'd rather have a texture on the tree than a painted pattern, that's your choice. Okay, so this is what I want everyone to look up at the screen for a second. This is something I want you to do, okay? You're gonna get another piece of paper. This is just a piece of printer paper. You're gonna put your hand on here. You're gonna flip it, and then you're going to lift up the board or whatever you're working on, put it down, peel this piece off. Now this is the back of my sculpture, and you can
Miss Venger,
yes.
I have to like leave the meeting and then like join back
Okay.
because I have to leave where I am, and then because I'm not home right now. But I like checked my clay before I left, and then I added some water, which was like this morning at like 9ish. And
Okay. So Jillian, I need you to
last night.
I need you to finish the work. If you're not coming back to class, you still have to.
I will be coming back to class.
Oh, I thought you said you were.
I'm leaving like right now, but I just have to like leave right now. But I'm joining back soon.
Leave the meeting or leave your house?
Well, I'm not at my house. I'm at my mom's work.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going like to my house.
Okay. Well,
So
we'll see you soon. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so this is the back of the tree, and you can see why I flipped it over. We want to make sure that we close these connections because they could be weak points. And then I'm also noticing, looking at this from a different perspective, this is not exactly symmetrical. This one goes way up higher than this one. So now it's my opportunity to manipulate this a little bit because it's still wet. I can do that. So I'm going to push this one down a little bit, and maybe this one. I don't want to bend the limb. I just want to bend the branches a bit, just a smidge. Okay, so now I have to go through and compress this back side. And here's a little trick. You might want to go through and score these areas because you didn't have an opportunity really to get in here and score. So this will just help a little bit with compressing and attaching. So I've scored them. Now I'm going to go in and really compress. Take my finger and seal. These attachments have to be super strong. And then I'm going to use my tool to get in there into these little creases. Remember, compress first and then seal. Something very satisfying about making something that's symmetrical. So I'm choosing to keep this smooth because I really love to paint intricate patterns on things. So the pattern that I choose might come from my heritage. In fact, one Christmas I was just really focusing on pattern a lot in my own artwork. And so I was at my aunt's house and then my grandma's house, and I decided to go around and photograph every pattern that I could find in the house. So I photographed textiles and patterns in the rugs and patterns in the stained glass in the door and patterns in people's clothes, and everywhere I could find a pattern in the houses and on people I photographed. And I went back and looked at that a year later, and I'm like, wow, these patterns are really influential to me in my life because I grew up with them, you know? They were always in my house. So I might want to go back and look at those photos and take one of those patterns and use it to put a pattern on my tree, you know, especially one that involves, you know, my grandma, because this tree is about her. Okay, so now this is kind of the fun part where we get to do some detail. When you're sculpting, even if you're doing a wall piece, you want the back to look neat and tidy, just as nice and tidy as the front. So here are a couple things I'm going to do. First thing, I'm going to take this sponge. This is just a cut up piece of sponge I got. You could ask your parents if there's an old sponge you could cut up. And I'm going to really wring it out. You don't want to saturate your piece with a bunch of water. And I'm going to use that sponge to really smooth this out. Get rid of all my finger marks and my tool marks, even inside, in between the crevices of the limbs. And I'm going to pay attention really to the shape of that negative space. I want it to be the same on both sides. Symmetry. You run out of moisture, just wring it out again. The sponge is a really good smoothing tool, especially at the joints where you've attached. You want to really smooth out that texture work. Make it look like you didn't just attach it, that it grew out of that tree trunk. Get the sides here. The sponge is a nice tool as well because you can contort it and fit it into the seams here. Okay, and you don't have to make it perfect, you know. The fact that it's handmade is part of the charm. Okay, this is the back still, right? This is still the back because it's flat. We want the other side to be the front because it's a little bit more round. So before I flip it back over, I'm kind of going to finish it. So one of the things I might want to do is take a tool and have fun and create a little bit of depth here, even in the back. So I'm going to push this tool into this crease here and just give it that nice little detail. And then maybe a crease where I think that these two are separate might be kind of a fun detail. Just pushing it in slightly. I'm not cutting it, right? I'm just creating kind of like a crease. And this is all aesthetic choice. You don't have to do this. It's just a little detail that I think makes it look more plump. Makes it look like it's more three-dimensional. Maybe up here too. You see how I'm digging it in, and instead of just leaving it as a line, I'm kind of sweeping away with my tool here to create a little bit of a bevel. Okay, so, and then you could take a paintbrush, dip it in a little bit of water, and then just kind of clean those up just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to do exactly what I did again, but I'm going to take a new piece of paper because that one was kind of falling apart. I'm going to put that back on there, and then I'm going to flip it back over and get it back to the front. So now, oh, I forgot to do one thing. Let me show you. We do that flip one more time. We need to put a hole in the back so that we can hang it on the wall. And now is a good time to do that. So here's my advice for that. Take a paintbrush. You have to remember that clay will shrink on you. So you want to think about how big like the head of your screw or nail is, and then make your hole a little bigger than that because it's going to shrink. So I just take a paintbrush or maybe a little pencil or whatever you have, and at an angle I push in right about here. So I'm going to take this tool and I'm just going to push in at an angle and like twist a little bit. And that creates a hole with a ridge to it so that that nail will hook on that ridge. Let me zoom in here. You see kind of what that looks like?
Miss Granger,
Yeah.
are you supposed to put a hole in the trunk?
Yes.
Okay.
You want to pick a sturdy, thick area. So this is a good spot. Don't put it too low, right? Because you're hanging it on the wall. And the support needs to be about this far down from the top. Okay, that's an important step because you're not going to want to do that once you start adding stuff to the other side. All right, so now I'm going to flip this over carefully. You don't want to bend it. Clay has a memory. It will remember that you bent it, and it will, when it dries, it'll kind of want to go back that way because clay particles will move as you bend them. So now we notice that, okay, our front needs some more work. The back looks so great, and now the front needs work. So I'm going to do exactly what I did to the back, to the front, and I flattened it out a little bit so I could spend a little time kind of like rounding it back out because I'm not going to flip it back over again. So I might want to go around and pinch it back to a nice curve. Really make sure those limbs are attached well. Make sure we've got the same on both sides relatively, right? Like we talked about, variation's not a bad thing. A little bit, the touch of the artist's hands is important to these. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my sponge and smooth. So we have to keep these moist for the next stages of this project. So if they dry out over the break, you won't be able to attach anything to the tree afterwards, and you have to start over. So your homework is to protect your piece from drying out by unwrapping it on Wednesday and checking on it and getting it wet. And when I say get it wet, don't dump a bunch of water on it because it will fall apart. Just take a sponge like this and water it down and then wrap it up real tight again. Spray bottle is good. Yeah.
Can you also use a spray or a paintbrush?
Paintbrush works, yeah. Spray bottle works.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Granger, I'm back.
Oh, that was quick. All right.
Yeah, I don't live far from my mom's work.
Wow. Yeah, that was like a matter of minutes. Okay, so Jill, we're just working on the front part now. And we poked a hole in the back, not all the way through for the nail. So that, I think that's the part you missed.
Okay, well, I told you this earlier when I was at my mom's work, but my clay is dry. I checked on it like last night before I went to bed, and it was dry.
Oh, right. Okay, so can you work on moisture, like putting some water on it and hydrating it?
Yeah.
Okay. It might need to sit for a couple days,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna have to re-wedge it.
I used to work with clay a lot when I was younger, so I now like have to rehydrate it a lot, which is pretty easy. Because I just like put I make a crater and then I kind of just like roll it in with my hands, and it kind of helps.
Good. I'm glad. That sounds like a good plan. All right, so now I've wet this down. It's nice and smooth. I'm going to go in with this tool again, and I'm going to create those creases. And I might even accentuate them because this is the front. I'm going to take a little bit more time on those just because I'm going to see this part. So if you don't have this kind of tool, you can use a butter knife or even the edge of a ruler. You could do this with an edge of a ruler pretty easily. In fact, that might be a good tool for you guys. And you want to do these things before you add anything to them, because then you know your limbs are ready and you don't have to do any more smoothing or any kind of detail work on them. They're good to go. I like this detail because it makes the limbs look like they're kind of sitting next to each other. It adds some dimension to the piece. And when a piece dries a little bit more, you can do some carving on it. There are different stages of working with clay. There's the wet stage, which we're in now. And then after you attach everything, then there's a stage called the leather hard stage where you let it dry a little bit and the clay starts to get hard. It's still wet. You could still add things to it and you know, it's not totally dried out, but that's the stage that you want to carve and add texture and stuff, because things, when you're carving, things just kind of ribbon off your piece. And it's a lot easier to carve than it's really hard to get detail when your clay is this wet. So that leather hard stage is a really important stage. And then there's the bone dry stage, which is when your clay completely dries out, and at that stage you can't add any more clay, because when clay dries it shrinks. And when it shrinks, it moves. So if you try to attach a really wet piece of clay to a piece of clay that's dry, the wet clay is gonna shrink and move, and the dry clay that you put it on is not, and so it's gonna form a big crack. Let me do a time check here. We've got about 20 minutes left of
Miss
work
Granger?
time. Yeah.
Are we gonna have to fire these twice?
No, because you guys aren't glazing them. You're going to be painting them with acrylic. So you'll bring them to school and I'll fire them once, and then we'll paint them with acrylic paint.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to take my paintbrush here and just smooth out those little creases. Get rid of the tool marks. And then I'm going to show you how to build your figure and maybe attach it if we have time. My figure is the skeleton grandma in the ballroom dress. And I'm going to show you just a really simple way of building a figure. We're not going to get too complicated with this. We're going to keep it simple. If you look at those Mexican Tree of Life sculptures, they're pretty, the figures are not too complicated. They're pretty basic. Okay, so I'm going to put that aside for a minute and get a new piece of clay. I can let this sit out for a little bit because it's pretty wet, but if your piece is starting to dry out and you're done working on it, you always want to wrap it up right away. Okay, so I've got my lump of clay here. I want to kind of get a size measurement. Look at my drawing again. My drawing is a little bigger than my sculpture. And different. You see how it kind of changed a little bit? Which is fine. If that happens to you, that's totally okay. So my advice to you now is before you attach anything, you make all of your parts and you keep them wet, and then when you're done making all your parts, then you attach everything at the same time. That's my advice to you in terms of your workflow. So we're going to make the figure, and then I'm going to make the candelabras, and make the birds, and then I'll probably attach those all first, and then the final detail would be the addition of the leaves and the avocados. I think that's a good strategy because those are more delicate. You want to put them on last because they're going to dry really fast. So my ballroom dancer, she's up against the post here. I might put her in a more fluid pose because right now she looks pretty static, like she's just like stuck there. So I might make her look like she's dancing. Actually, I'm gonna push this aside and I'm gonna leave this here for reference because that's why we make these. They're good reference material. All right, so I think the most stable way to deal with this figure would be to roll out a really thin slab of clay first. So you could go see if you have a rolling pin in your kitchen and make sure it's okay with the people in charge of your kitchen to use it for clay. It's not toxic. You can wash it and it'll be fine. So I'm going to roll out a pretty thin slab here, and I'm going to build the figure on this slab. I'm going to make it look 3D, but I want something for it to be stable on. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of measure out again, how big do I want this figure? She's going to go up to maybe like right about there. So 3 inches. She's going to be pretty tiny. Pretty tiny. So her head's going to be right about 3 inches, is about that big. So I'm going to use this needle tool to do a quick sketch. And I might put her torso to the side a little bit so she looks like she's swaying and dancing. And then her skirt is going to come out here and be bigger. I'm kind of drawing her in there first. And then I'll deal with the arms later. And then the legs be out here and then this way. Okay, and then I'm going to take this tool and just cut her out like a cookie cutter. This is sort of an easy way of dealing with a figure on, because you're putting her on a pretty flat surface. So we can make this look more like it's more in relief, 3-dimensional. Okay, so I've got this basic figure. And then this is what I'm going to do, because I think this will be an easier way for you guys to add this delicate thing. I'm going to take this slab figure and I'm going to score this. I'm going to put her on here first. Make sure she's where I want her to be. And then I'm going to trace where I need to score. Okay, carefully peel her off, and then take your fork or your needle tool, whatever you have, score. And you have to score both sides of everything you attach, not just one side, but both sides. Because if you don't, you're not really creating that zipper that we're needing to suction that clay together.
Miss Greninger,
Mm-hmm.
if we're done with the limbs, can we start with the little figures?
Yeah, of course. That's why I like to be a couple steps ahead of you guys, so that if you are a little bit faster, you have something to do. You know what to do next. Okay, so now I'm compressing. Well, I'm not going to smooth it out like I did the limbs because I want it to have some dimension. I'm going to add more clay to it, and I'm going to round her out. So now that she's attached, now I can go in. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you guys can see better. You can take a tool and really make sure she's attached. So probably a good idea so she doesn't come off later. And then I'm going to work on giving her more dimension. So when I say dimension, I mean three-dimensional, making her look less flat and more round by adding more clay and maybe sculpting what I have so far. So remember, details are hard to get when your piece is this wet. So you do the best you can until it dries a bit and you can carve. I have other ceramic tools here that I really like. This one is a smaller loop tool, and it's one of my favorites because I can really get in there and carve more detail. Okay, so now that's attached well, I'm going to go around and kind of give this dress a little more dimension. I'm going to add some more clay to it, so I'm not really going to spend too much time sculpting. But the chest is a skeleton rib cage, so I really don't need to add more dimension to that. I just maybe later on when it dries a bit, I'm going to go in and carve the rib cage out. I definitely will add more to the skull because it's got more dimension to it, and the skirt and all the ruffles down at the bottom of the skirt I'll add, and I want to carve away at the legs more, so because they're little skeleton legs. That'll be the fun part. It'll kind of add extreme sort of detail to the piece once we get in there and carve. But for now it's too wet, can't do that. Okay, so what do we do next? Well, I'm going to add more. Actually, she's got the top of her dress maybe needs a little bit of more clay to it. Right there. And then I'm going to add more folds here, and then a really pretty like bottom ruffly part. So how am I going to add folds? I think I'm going to just create another slab, a tiny little slab. Now here is something really important to listen to. If you add a piece of clay on top of a piece of clay and you seal it and you trap air in there, if you don't poke a hole in that trapped air part, it will explode. It will break off because that air inside there is going to have moisture, and that moisture is going to boil in the kiln, and when you boil something it creates the gas bubbles, and those gas bubbles need to escape and pop, and they will forcefully push their way out of your piece. So if you're going to attach a piece of clay on top of here, you have to be really careful to either super compress it or poke some holes in it if you're not sure. So I'm going to go in here and really push, really compress, so I know there's no trapped air. Curl this up a bit. And then I can take a tool and add those folds in there. The folds can kind of conform to like the flow of the skirt. go in and paint on them a little bit, make them smoother looking. I could go in and carve later. I'm going to take this tool and kind of carve away a little bit of the rib cage so that that top of that dress looks like it's three-dimensional. Add a little dimension here.
Miss Granger.
Mm-hmm.
So the fire alarm keeps getting triggered in my house because there's so much dust. I need to like disable mine because it like my dog's in my room with me, so he doesn't like go and be with the people that are working on the house.
Okay.
And he has like really sensitive ears.
Mm-hmm.
He gets shaky when we hit him in my bed.
All right.
Disable it real quick.
Okay. All right, so where are we at? Time check. Okay, so
Miss
we
Granger.
hang on one sec. We got about 10 more minutes until we're going to clean up. So try to set a goal for yourself and ask yourself, what am I going to do in the next 10 minutes? And then be prepared to wrap up and maybe take a picture before you wrap up. Remember, you're posting a WIP today. And that's it. What's up?
I was going to ask if we could work on it over break because
course.
mine keeps on cracking.
If it's cracking, you want to add moisture to it and compress your cracks.
But it's like in the middle of the limbs that I'm connecting.
When you post your WIP, I'll take a peek at it, okay?
Okay.
Yes, you of course you can work on it over break if you want to do that. That's great. But it's not a requirement. I don't want to give you extra homework. I just want you to babysit your clay so it doesn't dry up. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is add a ruffle to this bottom part. And I think to do that, I'm going to roll out a coil, and then I'm going to texturize that coil before I attach it. And it's kind of fun. This is what I did. Maybe I'll even enhance it. I want the skirt to look like it's kind of like she's spinning and it's flaring out. So I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to actually like push it out. Because there's a second layer of clay there that I just added. So I have some clay to work with here. I can kind of make it flared out. That's kind of fun. Maybe it's like that. Like she's spinning. So if I do that, then I have to give more detail to this part because we've just lifted her skirt up a little bit. So I have to sculpt more leg and the back of her skirt. I'm also going to add ruffles to this, the whole ridge. Okay, so I need a pretty skinny little coil here. And I think I'm going to texturize it before I put it on there. So first I'm going to score one side so it's ready to attach. And don't get lazy about the scoring because what'll happen is your piece will look like it's attached, but as soon as it dries it'll just fall right off and you'll be like, why did it fall off? And then I'll look at, I can see in between and where it fell off how well you scored. You can't hide from that. I will see if it falls off how well you scored. So Okay, so then I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to kind of scrunch it up like a ribbon. Let me show you. See how I'm kind of like ribboning it together? Oh, the lights. Okay. And this is fun. Their dresses had so much pom-pom to them. So much flair and drama. I hope this is long enough. And then I think I need to score this side again because I kind of squished the scoring. Can't see what you're doing, can you? There we go. And then I'm going to get this wet with a little paintbrush, this side too. And then very carefully kind of line up where I want to put it. I think I'm going to have to make some for the bottom. I'm just going to place it for now and then I'll attach it in a minute. Curve it around and attach it there. Okay, so that's not quite attached yet. I need to compress and then I think I'm going to use this tool to go through and really attach it. So I want you to be able to see what I'm doing here. I'm just taking this tool and like pushing on it and dragging it up so that it's becoming attached. Remember, you can't just stick it on there, and the water is deceptive. The water makes you think that it's attached, but that water will evaporate, and if you don't have any real attachment there, it will fall off.
Miss Grenninger,
Mm-hmm.
if we put everything away and we submitted.
I think you're cutting out.
Hold on. Is this better?
Yeah.
If we already finished and we put everything away and already posted our WIP at the end of class, can we start our checkout?
No, I prefer that you stay in sync with the class because the checkouts involve discussion and sometimes some sharing of more information. And you do need to stay till the end of class.
Okay, thank you.
I don't really like you guys to move ahead and do stuff ahead of time because there's a reason why I like to do it together with you. Okay. All right, so I'm just doing a little bit of fine carving right here on the legs, and I'll do way more later. So this is what I got so far, and I'm excited to see what you guys have. In next class, when we meet again after break, we'll do maybe a little critiquing together, and I'll help you with some stuff. I know today was all demo, but some days are just going to be like that because I have to show you how to make things. Okay, so it's 3 o'clock. We're out of here in 10 minutes. So that means here are the steps. Wash your hands. Take a photo of your piece before you wrap it up. Put a little water on it. Double bag it. Tuck it under the board. Come back, post your WIP, and do your checkout. I'm going to go wash my hands and then come back to the computer. All right, I'm also going to take a whip so you guys can see this up close. Okay, take a picture, post it. We'll take 2 pictures, one close up of the figure so far. Okay.